Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for taking the time to join us this afternoon for this particular conversation. By way of introduction, my name is William Tisoni, and um, I am the community manager for iHub. Again, I'm responsible for the community space and community engagements happening here at iHub Nairobi. For the people who aren't too familiar with iHub, iHub is essentially an entrepreneur support organization that basically supports startups, entrepreneurs, innovators, change makers, just do the best work that they can, right? Our role is to help these different actors along the entrepreneurial journey. We do that in three main ways, through either our co-working spaces that we have here in Kenya. We also have a hub in Rwanda, Nigeria, and our US hub in Namibia. Our second bit, which is our focus area, is through our incubator and accelerator programs, where we work with innovators, change makers, entrepreneurs, startups. Just how do we, in an effort to build that capacity, helping them solve problems for the Kenyan ecosystem and in Africa at large. And lastly, we try to organize community engagements like this, where we get to share insights from different speakers, different industry leaders, just for them to just meet and connect with our entrepreneurial community as a way of sharing knowledge with the greater ecosystem. For this particular conversation, we are going to be having it under the when discussing civic tech. The whole point of this is, again, how do we use technology for good, right? How do you use technology to safeguard democracy? And in Kenya right now, we have been seeing this wave where a lot of activism has been actually happening online. So how do we capitalize on this particular moment to just kind of talk about how is technology being used in the positive ways and also in the negative ways. What can we do? What can we do better? And then the best practices that we can learn from, that we can share with other change makers, other civic tech organizations. So that's the whole purpose of this conversation, to just kind of build a more elaborate CSO space, especially when it comes to governance. So for today, we're going to be having a quite experienced panel. But before we get to the panel, I would like to invite Mark Kaigwa from Nendo, who's going to briefly share some of the insights from Nendo, just talking about what they have been able to gather from a social media aspect. Then from then, we'll then head over to our panel conversation led by Eric Mugendi. So before we get to that, we'll head over to Mark, who will introduce himself and then talk about his organization. So over to you, Mark.
Thank you so much. Yeah, excited to be back and get this opportunity to share a couple of remarks. I'm going to sample one of Nendo's recent reports. We've been generating just a whole host of different types of reports during the protests, and so it's been just one where we've been sharing insights almost like constantly. And let me see if I get these slides to fire up. So yeah, I'm going to start somewhat in the middle because I also know, in terms of time, just to try to set the table. So firstly, in terms of who Nendo is, just briefly. So Nendo does research and marketing and training. So sort of three arms of what Nendo does to serve leaders, teams, nonprofits, for-profits, and a range of just different clients, typically looking at the internet, social media, or mobile phones, and having a series of questions, interventions, or insights that they're looking for. So social media listening is something Nendo has done since, 2016, thereabouts. So we have a lot of experience. And so this is one of the summary slides where we're just looking at the evolution and cramming a lot in here. If you take even sometimes a single day during this timeline, you will learn so much. But essentially, people ask, with Reject the Finance Bill, what was the spark? What was the trigger? In fact, some people would even argue last year's finance bill, the 2023 finance bill, was worse or objectively more challenging or difficult. And as far as we can tell from the data we've looked at, which in this case of what you're seeing here is tens of millions of posts on X. I'll also spend some time talking more about TikTok. So what we see here is the motor vehicle tax, the tax on bread, on sanitary pads. But this motor vehicle tax and the way it was socialized in the media, that started the finance bill conversation that led to, this is the first ever mention of reject the finance bill. And there's, again, this thunderous rise that just happens that leads to obviously the bill being withdrawn, the grounds of parliament being broken into or occupied. And then you see the conversation after the finance bill shift towards the presidency, in a way of saying, in the current regime, which leads later towards the entire cabinet being sent home. So this is everything on one timeline. I think we've had hundreds of slides and dozens of reports going deeper into different parts, different trends and sub-trends. What I thought to talk about today was a bit more on TikTok, which I feel is underestimated and underappreciated. In fact, I have the view that perhaps TikTok Live would have been maybe perhaps as important, if not more important than X Spaces, but it's a bit of like a an open one. So I think part of why TikTok is unique, different, and from all the studying and all the data we've seen on TikTok at Nendo, we think there's a new class of content creator, and it's something we call activist talk. Part of what we've seen, which we've documented for multiple years, is vernacular content on TikTok has been quite powerful on its own. So there is a Bukusu talk and a Somali talk, and you name the community, right? Kikuyu, Luo, Kamba, Embu. There's all these sub genres of TikTok with music, dance, which is the typical TikTok fare. And then you have now even comedy, but also now activism, right? Just a local scrutiny. And so what we at Nendo have called it is, it's as though there's a rise of people who've realized I was doing many things online, and I was in what TikTok calls 200 view jail. So I never crossed 200 views no matter what I did. But then when I became an activist, when I went to the website of the Auditor General, when I went to the, to these various resources and I created content, I emerged as this really, really significant figure. And so when you look here, you see astounding, like mind-numbing figures, right? So reject the finance bill, over 1 billion views, Ruto must go over 700 million. And the finance bill, you start to add these two, you get north of 500 million views. Now, people often ask, surely this can't be right. Are you telling me it's 1 billion with a B? And the answer is yes. And in the early days, especially, it started with not just Gen Z, but certainly younger Kenyans finding global content creators who they admired, respected, engaged with often, and told them, you must talk about Kenya. This happened dozens of times, but some of the three we would pick, this African American called Chevy, this British gentleman called Dylan Page, and even people, this is if you have people under the age of, I don't know, maybe 13 to 25, they might know this gentleman is called I Show Speed. And people spammed his live chat to where he said the words reject finance bill. He didn't even know what he was saying, but people were like, we got the clip we wanted, and they just ran with it because they had this global endorsement from some very big global figures. And that is part of why the numbers look so big. I mean, many of these creators, and there's many more like them, but these are just a sample. When they spoke into this situation, it had a big impact. Locally, I'd say that this is the difference maker has been Kenyan. So make no mistake, it's not a diaspora thing. It's very much a Kenya-centric, sort of movement. And so you have everything from some creators who create like news briefings and bulletins. And I mean, it's the cinematic quality of some of the content that was created and is still being created is pretty phenomenal, like just how impressive it is. Others, like this gentleman here called Sabiu, recorded an entire music video during the protest, like and ended up featuring in Rolling Stone magazine. And then you have many, many others from different ethnic groups, socioeconomic classes, and others. I think some of the underlying ways, I think if we wanted to talk AI, for instance, there's what I'd call the visible and the invisible side, but everything from CapCut to the sounds of protests. And I know Eric is here. I hope he talks a bit about their work there. They did some really great work at Uncensored with Odipo Dev on that. But you have anything from comedy, humor, a lot of creators who then came into the slipstream of these, just pushing around the finance bill and participating in the protests. You have some content which is a lot closer to the galaxy of things that Nendo studies and tracks in TikTok, where one sound, one snippet, one little sound bite, one dance, if you take Anguka Nayo, comes out and just makes a massive difference. So you have animators working. You have entire skits where if you don't know it's the finance bill, you'd never guess, but very creative ways to pass across the deeper meanings of being an active citizen. And then these spreading. And you even have people like Dennis Ombachi who allege that, hey, when I mention the finance bill, my videos don't do so well. So finding creative workarounds, what they thought was some sort of algorithmic interference that was suspected. So there's plenty we could talk about, including the AI songs. This is the one part I think, Eric, that I feel was a bit open-ended for the work Africa Uncensored did. We've seen so many AI-based songs from Suno.ai that have come out during the time. But looking at TikTok, for me, it continues. Even now, the critique, the intellectual critique happening on TikTok as to why did the protests not carry over, or how do we move on from here? They are at very deep levels, I think, happening pretty impressively. One for me, which is the legacy I expect, I should say, from this is people are now picking other different bills. And like the way a ChatGPT instant was used to create the finance bill, where you could, instead of looking through a long PDF, you could go and ask it, I earn this much, what's the impact with the finance bill? People are now picking other bills, writing public participation, learning how to be active citizens. And there's a toolkit of protest and public participation that's been rewritten and created just on the back of what's happened, that I think is expected in Nendo's prediction to devolve to the county level. I actually think the county, as opposed to the national level, is perhaps where the true legacy of a lot of the work that's happened might live. Briefly, just to talk Starlink and Safaricom, I think it's worth it just with sort of tech. This is one of our big techs, the home of M-Pesa. There was a lot. I think Safaricom has had some accusations leveled against them in terms of switching off of the internet or throttling of social media websites. And that ended up becoming a massive story on its own. Airtel, correspondingly, which has tried for years to become the second SIM card, a key part of just every person's life, has had a minute to sort of become this protest brand where people move to or start to engage with. And we've seen a lot of data that correlates back to other data we were tracking when Safaricom went through a political boycott, right, following the 2017 election. So we're obviously waiting to sort of see how this settles, but there's genuine discontent. And that's partly why I think even someone like Starlink, who I shared just now, has been this new brand where there's a lot of questions on what they mean, what they represent, and whether they're the actual alternative people are seeking. But ultimately, these are some of the highest negative sentiment numbers Safaricom has experienced in a while that are not related to their service. And this typically affects many other things within their business and enterprise in our estimation. Overall, lots of anger, or a lot more anger than is typically there. And you don't see people caring about brands in this way, but that same activism that was there to government might get used against the brand. Starlink, though, has been one of the winners or darlings of this time, not just because people downtown in the protest had Starlink and shared the actual logins downtown for people to have Wi-Fi, to stream, to share, to post, to publish, but also because over time, people are saying, well, look, this might be the future where I evade censorship, I evade any sorts of issues or anything that might hold me back from participating online. And then even Payless, this app that came out that's trying to make people explore paying without paying fees, transaction fees. They've been a silent winner of the current time, because most people hear the marketing, but the switching costs are very high. The friction is very high to try something new apart from M-Pesa, but people have done it. So that's a quick look, I guess, at hopefully something to set the tone for the conversation to follow. And we have reports on Kenya of different kinds, and Uganda and Nigeria, just anywhere it's social media. So wherever it's happening, there's a chance to actually delve and get insights. And Nendo has been doing, in some cases, situation reports, like shorter timeline or larger intelligence briefs, just following different types of questions you can ask about the internet and social media culture and behavior and its impact. And some of them are fizzling out, but there's others that look like they're still staying steady or rising up. And of course, there's a counter narrative, counter efforts against a lot of what was seen back then. So that also features too. And then there's deep dives as well that can be done. But yeah, that's a bit about me, a bit about Nendo, and excited for the panel that will follow. And yeah, I'll hand it back to William and possibly to Eric to take away. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark, for that overview. So again, we'll just hand it over back to Eric to kick off the conversation. But yeah, thanks for that brilliant overview. Just as a heads up, Vanessa is having a challenge on joining. We are trying to resolve that with the team. But again, we can just proceed with the conversation as we try to resolve the issue with that. But again, please proceed with the conversation, Eric.
All right. Thanks, William. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, clearly.
Okay. All right. So those are very interesting insights from Mark. And I think, I guess my biggest kind of takeaway from all of this is that the nature of protests, as we've known them to be, has, I'd say, fundamentally shifted away from like the very visibly political kind of campaigns.
I think Eric might have frozen. Oh,
Yes.
sorry, Eric, you froze a little bit. Or is it just me? Just checking.
No, he's
Eric's,
frozen.
I think it was me. It was not me.
Yeah,
No, it's not. It's not. I think it's on Eric's.
Yeah, and let me see if you can reconnect.
Sorry, I have no idea what happened. My connection just cut out. So, are we back? Am I back? Am
Yes, you're back. You're
in?
back.
Okay. Right. So what I was saying was that fundamentally, what we've seen is the nature of protest changing and shifting so that it's not as visibly and overtly political anymore, and it's now focusing more on the issues that are relevant to the people. So that's why we saw things like the use of like generative AI as a way to express people's frustrations in some of the music that was being created, and in the use of ChatGPT as a way to kind of democratize access the to the finance bill, which was the initial locus of a lot of these protests. And since then, I think we've seen the conversation shift more towards how we can use technology, or how these technologies have essentially lent themselves to like people-led protest movements over and above the initial kind of use cases that they were built for. So for example, an app like Zello that is meant to be like a walkie-talkie app that was featured as a way that protesters were able to kind of communicate with each other. And now you've seen instances where like Uber drivers are using it to communicate with each other without having to incur like the cost of making calls. And so I think one of the fundamental kind of realizations is that we can use technology as a way to advance a lot of the narratives that were at the core of previous conversations. Because as Mark pointed out, this didn't just start with this year's finance bill, because there was a lot of discontent with the bill last year. And one of the things that came out of that was the introduction of the housing levy, and then how like the public participation around last year's finance bill saw a lot of protest and a lot of like noise that was being made, but this was largely limited to people who are in the finance, especially the public finance space. Like it didn't really transcend beyond those spaces into like what the conversations of ordinary citizens kind of looked like. And so what we've seen now is a way for citizens to meaningfully engage, especially learning from previous instances where they've contributed to these discussions and they've been ignored, and now they're making their voices heard using technology. So I guess looking at that, looking at how the idea of a public town square powered by technology has adjusted, I think I'm going to ask the panel to give their thoughts. And before we do that, I'm going to just introduce them briefly. There's me. I'm Eric Mugendi, Senior Editor at Africa Uncensored. And then there is Gitungo Wamere, who is in charge of who's from Mzalendo. And then there is Vanessa Gathecha from Microsoft Research, Dr. Shikoh Gitau from Qhala. So I think we can start in that order with Gitungo, and then hopefully with Dr. Shikoh, and then Vanessa, after Vanessa joins.
Well, thank you, Eric. And first of all, thank you for IHAB for organizing this very timely discussion. Before we started, I was telling William that these discussions need to be held more and more, because we don't need to see the momentum going down of the current spirit that we are facing at the moment. So I think I will start from analyzing the political environment that we are operating in before we had the Reject Finance Bill protest. Of course, the finance bill was the trigger, but even before then, if you go back since 2018, people have been protesting against finance bills, because we've been having finance bills that are more and more consolidating. They want to take more and more from the people. So since 2018, if you look at around 2019, there were protests in social media whereby there was a hashtag telling IMF, do not give us more money, do not we don't want more debt. And that's when the former president even left Twitter because of the pressure. So we have been operating like in a pressure cooker, and in June it burst. So if you go back to 2023, you will find that even the Finance and Planning Committee said that they have never received input from the public like they did in 2023. And for the first time, a committee in Parliament published input that they have received from the people. But unfortunately, even when they published the input that they have received from the people, they considered none of the input that was given. Then come to the housing levy, you saw the president, the executive chest thumping and saying it will happen whether you want it or not. The fuel prices. So there was anger that was growing slowly and slowly. And now come the Finance Bill 2024, I think the executives set themselves up without knowing. So they touched on issues that really touched the people, issues that really touched the youth. Look at the sanitary towels, look at the taxation on cars, look at so many issues, especially, for instance, look at the taxation on cars. It really touched on the middle class. And we've been saying for the longest that I've been in this sector, in the civil society sector, we've been lamenting about the civil society not participating, the middle class not participating in politics. But this time round, the executive really forced the middle class to participate in politics, but by touching them where it really hurts. So fast forward, the infrastructure of participating in politics, the infrastructure of the youth participating in politics, the middle class, and even the people as general participating in politics has been there. But there has been that level of apathy, people not really willing to participate in politics. Because like I've mentioned, in 2019, 2020, people said do not indebt us further. There has been other campaigns that people have been participating just online. But this time around, it moved from just clicking to going into the ground. I think when I assess the situation, when I assess the problem, it is the level of anger by the people really rose, and the people decided enough is enough. And now, you know, when there is a situation that necessitates you to act, then the infrastructure that is there, you start thinking, how do we use what we already have to make sure that we are not exploited further? And this is how now people exploited social media platforms, whether it's Twitter, whether it's TikTok, and you saw people becoming very innovative in terms of digesting the finance bill. Further, you saw young people interpreting it into their vernacular, into their mother tongue, and people really got interested. And they brought the problem home. Even if people initially did not understand what the finance bill was talking about, when it was interpreted, for instance, in Luo, in Kikuyu, in Kimeru, people really understood, like, okay, they are adding tax on this particular issue. I will not be in a position to afford a certain issue that I was affording initially. And people got really, the anger was really fired up, and people decided now to use the infrastructure that I'm saying, whether it is Twitter, whether it is TikTok. And now people came now, because even when people decided to use these social media platforms, the government did not really thought that people, you know, they are used to Kenyans. Kenyans will speak for 1 day, 2 days, and then they forget about it. So I think the government thought that people will just speak about it on social media, then forget about it. And that's why you saw the arrogance from the people in the finance committee, the arrogance from the executive, and arrogance from the members of parliament. Even sometimes belittling young people and saying iPhone carrying youth cannot do anything. They understand nothing about the finance bill. People who will protest 1 minute, the next minute they are in KFC. Such kind of arrogance. And people now decided, I think enough is enough. We will walk, we will march to parliament. And that has created now an environment whereby people are very interested in terms of governance. People are very, when it comes to public participation, they don't want to just, they don't want it just to be public participation, but meaningful public participation. So when we participate, then what? Will you take our ideas? If you don't, will you tell us why you did? Do we really matter in this public participation? And from where I come from, like in Mzalendo, initially, when we post like a call for public participation on Twitter, we've been doing this for the longest time. Like when there is a bill that is under public participation, we post it. There is Gathecha whereby we crowdsource public input. But since in between June and July, we've been seeing a growth in terms of interest of people wanting to participate in the legislative process. Even when you don't post that bill, people will text you, they will send you emails. Where can we get this bill? Are you organizing a public participation forum? So this kind of interest has grown. And for us, like now, as the civil society, we need now to think beyond. How do we keep this momentum? How do we engage these young people? How do we make sure that we continue crowdsourcing public input when there is public participation? How do we revamp some of the digital tools that we have to accommodate the changing times? So I think that is the environment that we are operating in. And from where I sit, more is likely to come. We haven't seen anything yet.
Right. Thank you, Gitungo. And especially just looking at the way you've been able to make what is happening in Parliament more accessible, like on social media, and then using tools like Gathecha. I think it's really important to think about what you've been able to accomplish so far and how this would look like, I guess, going forward. So now with Dr. Shikoh, I'd like to hear also what your thoughts are on what has happened, what's been happening on these digital spaces, and what, in your opinion as a practitioner, what this means for not just the civil society, as Gitungo has pointed out, but also like for the general public in terms of the increasing use of these technologies in a way that is kind of making it difficult for politicians to evade scrutiny, and then also making it so that people are increasingly more able to express themselves in meaningful ways. So I think the question is, how does this look like for you as a practitioner? And what does this mean for the people building these tools and trying to make these tools more accessible, and then also trying to innovate around these the need to get more people engaged in politics?
So thank you so much for having me. So apologies, we don't have power, and I'm hoping my phone will last the session through. And I'm using my computer as light because it's really dark now. It's getting dark here. So it is super interesting, these conversations. So many years ago, I'm not going to age myself. I actually did like what's the role of tech in civic education and citizen participation. It was very interesting learning, and we learned, okay, the power has come. I'm not trusting it. But the key thing for me at that time is I learned a theory, and I've applied it all of my life in different subjects. It's called the definition of innovation theory. And the definition of innovation theory is about how a new idea enters into a population and how it spreads. Yeah. So as I'm sure my colleague Barbara is here, as we've been studying the protest, we started saying, when did this idea first come? What was what ignited it the first time? And everybody keeps talking about the finance bill 2024. Actually, it is what is it called? It's the hope that was built by the KK manifesto. Everybody was very hyped. Everybody you talk to, and like even on Twitter, while there are a few dissenting voices, we tried scrapping Twitter. Elon Musk has made that very hard. Back to we wanted to go back to beginning of 2022 and come all the way to just understand, where did people get angry? Because that was the question we're trying to understand, is when did people get angry, and why did they get angry? That is, if we're able to answer that question, then you're able to answer why the finance bill protest. Yeah, but as far as back as we go on archival data, is people are very hyped up after the KK government. People from the villages, yes, there are dissenting voices on Twitter. There are people who are not very trusting on Twitter. They were not trusting of the government. But a majority of the people, the Christian voices that were quite loud, they were quite exciting. And what we know is the whole
Did we lose Shikoh?
subsidies, all of those things it just started building up from that. Yeah. Then there was the Sufuria Maandamano. Remember that at the very beginning of 2023, more distant again. Remember, it's the diffusion of an idea into a population. So it started with the people we all relying on Raila and his team to do this, but there were the few dissenting voices that kept saying, this is not right, this is not against the KK manifesto. And then it is like the innovators were the Raila people and stuff who are descending, and then the early majority were the people who are saying, oh wait, the manifesto is not, all these things are not giving. Then the biggest trigger was the opulence amongst the political class. I don't call them leaders. Some of them do not deserve that title. The political class, that's the opulence. And you're saying you're reducing our subsidies on some things for what? Yeah, because you're saying we want to be able to be productive, and people had already bought into, we want to be productive and support ourselves. We want to pay taxes and support ourselves, even in the villages, right? But when you start seeing the opulence, people are saying, but why are subsidies being removed? Why is fertilizer doing that? And productivity, while these people are doing this, the jet-setting lifestyles. So people started questioning, and that's when you see the early majority starting questioning. In Kenya, we're not very good at questioning. We are a very polite country, yeah, compared to others. So people started questioning, and they were being said, oh, don't question the government, don't question the will of God, don't question this. And as you go and you get like to the second majority group, people started now pumping. That is now the finance bill conversation started happening. And now the late majority is now, the conversation moved from us talking within our family groups on WhatsApp or arguing in our class WhatsApp groups to putting it out in the public. Yeah. And then TikTok, I'm with Mark. For me, TikTok has been the phenomenal outlier here, because everybody who knows about TikTok, we know about dancing, and we know about like funny lifestyle advice, makeup. I go to TikTok to just entertain my brain when I don't want to think, right? But then you go to TikTok, you're bamboozled with all this information around the finance bill, and it's well articulated. This person who was busy dancing some funny dance one moment is busy breaking down for you the finance bill. So the late majority started coming in because now people are speaking their language. And most of the recruitment, like from the observations, we do a lot of observational work, right? Like implanting ourselves like in WhatsApp groups and just listening what people are saying, because that's where most conversations are happening, or Telegram. Most conversations were triggered by a TikTok video that was posted on the WhatsApp group. And it will be 3 hours worth of conversations from different. And then somebody puts, and then tomorrow somebody else adds another conversation. And Moshiri did the one thing that made this thing burst open is when he translated it into Kikuyu. Yeah. And it just started. But where did it start was that one descent, like when people started saying, why are subsidies being used to buy expensive shoes? Those conversations were not happening on Twitter or TikTok, they were happening on WhatsApp groups. But then they moved to the late majority, and that's where it happened. So if you understand that cycle of diffusion, what I keep telling people right now, people think, oh, because people know maandamano, there's not much. My biggest one, if you talk to, is if you go like the late majority, the ones that the laggards who are now getting into the idea, is they're getting it. And the worst thing about the laggards is they are stuck on an idea, because it is hard for them to adapt an idea. But the moment they get a new idea, they hold on to it and get stuck onto it. So even the people, even like the pastors who are most supportive, the people in the villages, Ukondani, now they are getting to the message like, we need to do something different in the country. And this is the moment it's hitting. The Mandamano has come and gone, but this is the moment they are adapting. So for anything to change, it has to be done drastically, because those laggards are the ones that are opinion shapers in the villages, because they get stuck, the chiefs, the clansmen, all those ones. So for me, for you people to understand what happened, is you have to go as far back as, yes, I know somebody went back to chasing off the former president of Twitter, but this particular discontentment started because the hype cycle, not the hope cycle, crashed. We were not eased of hope. We were just put it down. It was crushed down on us. People were like, one moment we're very hopeful, the next moment we were not hopeful at all. And that is the understanding. And for me, each of these places, technology has played a role. Yeah. I strongly believe it started on our small WhatsApp groups. Then it went on to Twitter, and TikTok blew it off. And now it's back to our WhatsApp groups and SMSs and to conversations in the villages. That is how it's happening. So I always say technology is an amplifier of human intent. Yeah. So we cannot look at technology in isolation. You have to look at it and what other things are going around it. And so that for me is the most important part of it, is that when we are looking at these conversations about civic tech, and going back to the X years ago, when I did like a civic tech platform, is you have to connect, especially for civic education, you have to connect the offline and online and see where does each of them play. And yes, there's what is it called? Traditional media, the radio stations and the TV stations. While they played a role, they did not play that much. It is Telegram, WhatsApp groups, primarily, then TikTok and Twitter. Those ones were the biggest technology. And what I'm loving now is people are trying to now consolidate these conversations into designing tech that actually speaks to these late majority and laggards, because those are the people who are going to make a difference, whatever the election outcomes are going to be. These are the people who are hardest to convince from an idea. And once you convince them into an idea, it's the hardest to unconvince. It's the hardest to retrain or train. So these are your 45-plus-year-olds who are very stuck on ideas because they have been through life. They say, this is how life has been. This is what we don't want to change. Those are the people that are going to be hard to convince or unconvince. And they're the ones right now who in their WhatsApp groups, they are agitating. Yeah, when the young people are saying, we are going to be doing it silently. I'm tired of going to the streets. I'm going to do something with my skills. I'm going to do something with I'm going to be talking to my peers. These guys are like, walifanyia nini watoto wetu? That's where they are. And for them to unconvince them from that place is going to be to take another wave of like a new idea. And that new idea has to be super revolutionary. It has to outpace this one. Yeah, that is my input. And I have to shout out to my colleague, Barbara, who is like documenting this. We're trying to put out a paper, but every time we think we're putting a paper, something interesting comes up. So we need to like give ourselves a sell by date for this paper to come out. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. I also looking forward to that, to the paper that comes out of this. And I think one really interesting thing that you pointed out that I think Gitungo can also build on is the fact that this perception that this was like an online movement or like an online kind of revolution that is now happening offline is in and of itself like a bit fallacious. Like there's an assumption that things were happening online and then they shifted to the offline space. Well, in fact, you had a lot of things that were already happening in the offline space that just were not as visible, probably because they weren't as documented. So I'd like you, Gitungo, to speak about how we're seeing the public and people, especially young people, using technology and using all of these platforms as a means to kind of archive what is happening around them, and also what this means like going forward in terms of how we like campaign or how we advance like social kind of campaigns and how we try to push for accountability as well. Because one really difficult thing that we've seen is that a lot of these movements that try to push for some kind of social change end up faltering because they don't really translate into something meaningful offline. So what have you seen happening in your work at Mzalendo and elsewhere in terms of how these offline and online spaces are kind of merging together? And then also, if you can, what more needs to be done by the various actors in these spaces to try to make this like a much more meaningful interaction and conversation? You're muted.
Sorry for that. Well, I think in recent times, people had not seen a scenario whereby Article 1 of people being sovereign coming into reality. People have been talking about issues, people have been protesting against issues, but there's no single time when they saw the government backing down. But thanks to the June 25 parliament occupation, so many things happened that people realized, oh, we have the power. We are the people who have the power. If we want something, it can happen. And from that, you've seen some sort of citizen-driven accountability initiatives. You've seen people coming up with citizens coming up with tools. Even in Mzalendo, we had our promise tracker, but we've seen citizens coming up with their promise tracker, tracking promises that have been made by the president. Why do this? Because they have seen that if we demand for accountability, if we put more pressure, something might happen. And one thing that I would like to say, most of these things, tech tools, the platforms that we are seeing do not exist in a vacuum. They exist in a context, and there's the things that happen within that context are the things that determine how that tool will be useful, or the impact that tool may help us realize. For instance, if it is the promise tracker, we have seen, like, for instance, the young lawyer who is going to the ground. Yes, you promised, and maybe you did it. Did it come to fruition? So I think going forward, what we need to do, because of the laggards that that Shikoh has talked about, I think in Kenya, and for instance, there is a tech tool that we have, Dokeza. There is an issue of reception by the people. So you may come up with a very nice tech tool that will assist people, demand for accountability, assist people to have their voices heard, but it is difficult for them to have to receive it and use it. So I think going forward, what needs to be done, especially in this accountability or governance sector, is to create a lot of awareness and bringing the problem home. So if it is a governance issue, so how does it affect you as a person? If it is a lie that has been told today, or how does it affect you as a person? If it is public funds that have been, that has been misappropriated today, how does it affect you as a person? So if we bring that problem home and come up with these civic tech tools that will assist people to have their voices heard, I think they will be willing to participate. They will be willing to ask more questions, and they won't sit back helpless. So when their hopes have been shattered, they will have platforms, or they will have ways to have their voices heard. So I think going forward, to make these platforms sustainable and used by the people, is to involve the stakeholders. And also there is also an aspect of in the governance sector, there is this tendency of elitism. So if it is an issue of finance bill, if it is an issue of a conflict of interest bill, the tendency to think that it's only a certain group of people that can involve, it's only lawyers, it's only economists. So I think going forward, even when we engage, we need to simplify these issues as much as we can, so that we can have as many voices as possible, so that we can fill in as many gaps as possible, because technology is about filling in gaps, removing those gaps, and having everyone in the space. So I think going forward, there will be need for that stakeholders engagement, simplicity, and creating that awareness.
All right, thanks, Gitungo. That's very elaborate, but also very concise. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And back to Dr. Shikoh. I think so one of the platforms that Gitungo pointed out is Dokeza by Mzalendo. And then we saw all of the different GPT tools, including Finance Bill GPT, and there's like Corrupt Officials GPT. Which using technology in, I'd say, in ways that probably were not envisioned by the people who built them. So in the midst of all this, like, did you see any tools, any platforms that caught your eye? And like, are you able to speak on anything that, or any innovative uses of technology in the midst of all these protests that was notable to you?
Of course, the GPTs were out of the world, like super interesting. In fact, we were speaking with like the Meta people who are behind Llama, and And OpenAI people are like, yeah, that is what technology is. It's a tool that you can make into whatever you want. But for me, honestly, it's the simpler technologies that really spoke to me, like Moshiri's translation thing. It had such profound impact that is hard to measure, because what he literally did is he gave people the power to translate to whatever language they would, in whatever manner they want. It was posted on TikTok, but it also posted on all these WhatsApp groups for your cousins and your uncles, and it caused all these manners of debate. For me, that, if I was to rank everything up on a list, I think Moshiri's thing was like top, because it brought inclusivity into this conversation. And it brought those laggards and a late majority onto the conversation table. Like, I remember it was sent to my WhatsApp group, and one of my cousins like, hiya. Yeah, because it's like, you're saying, ask us, we are happy to pay taxes, you're supporting Nini, then they say, Mugoda, my shamba. You want to, my shamba for my, everybody tagged on something. For me, that was the biggest one. Like, and what then after that it happened, it enabled and empowered people to be able to build their own narrative on their own context. That is what it did. It is like a moment on inflation where, oh my God, I have the power to do something. And after that, what I have seen is like citizens of Kenya. I love what they are doing. They're like, we are asking you as a Kenyan, tell us what is happening around you. Yeah. Tell us, when is the last time you saw your MP? Yeah. Don't just salimia them. Tell us, what is their scorecard, right? How are they doing? What is the other one I saw? There's another one I forget to see, is like, you on your road. When were you promised the road to come? And you have the billboard there. Is the road there? Yeah. And you see, like, people like Morara, again, simple. They go, I mean, yeah, okay, no, his is expensive and simple. Going around the country, taking pictures of things. What it has inspired is all these other people doing the same and posting. Yeah. So my biggest worry is that we're creating all this like information. It's not being consolidated for learning, because the goal of it is to be able to learn, and it's about accountability. The other day, I was in a session with the head of public service, and I loved what he said. He said, I admire and support the young people because of calling us out and asking us for accountability. Being asked to be accountable is not something wrong. And for a public servant, in this case, to be able to say, I acknowledge that is something we should do more. And there are young people out there who are doing that. I feel like, well, many people might not believe that statement. I, for one, said it's a huge shift from saying, we are right, you're wrong, and you go deal with it. It's like, from like, you're right, we are wrong too. I acknowledge that what they're asking is not a bad thing. Asking us as the leaders to be accountable is not a bad thing. I support them. Those were his exact words, right? And if we can just get to the point, we are getting to that point where they are saying, okay, acknowledge, I support. And then the next point is actioning some of those acknowledge and support too. Can we actually just recheck our lifestyles, honestly, and our attitude towards Kenyans? We are servants of Kenyans. That is the second thing. But I love the fact that in many, because I go to these sessions, is many of them are saying, honestly, we cannot run away from accountability, because it's now facing us on the face. This is not like, I can say, it is like, it was launched 3 years ago, or it was promised 3. And it is not even like, what I'm loving about the conversations, even in my WhatsApp groups, is it's not just at the presidential level, even at county level, the MCA level. My MCA has seen fire. Sijui, he said, we are going to put sijui a garage, sijui nini. Iko wapi garage? The problem is the MCA is part of this WhatsApp community, WhatsApp groups, is listening. He can't run away. You can't just exit the group. You listen. Yeah. And you know that if you don't act on it, the next time your MCAing is gone. Yeah. And for me, that level of accountability is not something that happened. The simple technology, which I'm emphasizing on, yes, we can talk about AI, we can talk about these platforms, and I'm all for it. We are working with some partners on how do we make sure that this is sustained, people being able to build technology that is increasing citizenry participation. However, my biggest one is this, not human said, what is the word I'm looking for? People driven technologies, very simple, very easy to adapt. It's a phone and your friend taking a camera and saying it did not happen. So the goal, the biggest goal is like, I'm hoping the citizens of Kenya and all these other people who are doing this are able to archive this to say, this was date 28th of April. Of August 2024, we recorded and you said you have sent, like yesterday I saw somebody said, oh, we have sent some construction vehicles, the road will get restarted to be constructed. Okay, let's check 3 months, a month later, is there progress? 3 months later, in 6 months, is it finished? So that level of accountability of our budget and scrutinizing, like what I love about this is it used to be like 5 people who love data and accounting could look at the treasury documents. Now it's everybody's like, where is my county? Where is my sub-county? What projects were we promised? Which ones have they said they have finished? Which ones are actually finished? And being scrutinized and being very involved in your own leadership is something we are taught, like even at work, you're saying you need to get involved in the company's affairs. Otherwise, one day you'd find the company was closed. Us as Kenyans, we will never do that. Otherwise, that's why we were saying one day we wake up and the country is closed. Why? Ask Ghana, please. Yeah? Ask Ghana. Because why? Because you're not engaged. Right now, everybody is going to be very conscientious. Well, some of their habits are not fully ingrained and to take time to unearth. But people are more conscious that if I do this, these young people will salimia me. And I'm telling you that salimia habit has traumatized a lot of people. And we may salimia by calling, but it may salimia by we have blacklisted you as a brand or as a person. In that everybody, we're all humans and we are fallible to being liked. Yeah. So the moment you feel like, I'm going over the counter on this one, let me be very careful. So I feel like the simpler technologies are the ones that had most impact. And yes, we need to be able to be more smarter and more complex to make sure that this lives. But let's see the simpler technologies and encourage, because that is pure citizen participation, not a few people building and others contributing. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really interesting because I think at its core, at least from my experience with civic tech and the kinds of tools that have been built to kind of encourage people to like hold public figures accountable, and then the kinds of platforms that have built on top of that, doing work like verification and fact checking. I think that's what that critical element is what has been missing, like the actual translation of if a project is meant to have been funded and then there's a record that it was funded, but then it's a school that hasn't been built, or if it's a road that hasn't been tarmacked, or if there's something that was meant to be done but hasn't been done, how does it affect me as an individual? And I feel like what these technologies have done is they've kind of shown this at a really interesting and really significant scale. So I guess to the audience, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and then we will see how the questions will be addressed. But I guess in the meantime, I'm going to ask you, Gitungo and Dr. Shikoh, to put on your prediction hat, to rub your crystal ball and then tell us what you're seeing. So like, how do you see this kind of playing out in the the immediate term, which is now that the finance bill was withdrawn and then there isn't like something to rally people around as much, but then there's going to be more finance bills and more legislative actions being done in the future. How do you see this playing out in that space in terms of getting people to care, first of all, and to take action at the scale that we've seen in the recent past? And then also, how do you envision like this kind of citizen-driven engagement using technology going forward as a way to kind of drive public participation and public engagement in a way that is meaningful and impactful, and that's able to outlive, let's say, the causes that have formed the basis for this type of action? We can start with you, Gitungo.
Sorry. Thank you, Eric. Uh, in terms of what may happen, first of all, let me begin with a rider. I hope, because I know Kenyans have a very short attention span. I hope this will not be just a catchy thing that happened and they forget about it. But I'm glad in forums that I have attended, I've started seeing Kenyans linking issues. Like we have this leader, where did the rain started beating us? And they're linking it to elections. What kind of a person did we voted for? What kind of people do we usually vote for as Kenyans? Those are questions that our Kenyans are starting to ask themselves. And I hope that linkage, more and more Kenyans start realizing it, linking their problems to the kind of people that they vote. So if they want a country that that they envision, that they want to live in, they have to vote for a transformative leadership. The other thing is, between as per now, I'm seeing a situation whereby, and you are seeing it with our political leaders, they are firefighting. Is it about public participation? There are town halls everywhere, right, left, and center. They will start doing it. But now, even when the leaders are doing it, I hope Kenyans will continue asking this very fundamental question. So it is not just about us talking, it's about us having a conversation, having a dialogue, you listening to us and taking into consideration of what we are telling you. So one thing that I'm seeing happening in the immediate is meaningful public participation. So that one may come from our institutions, because initially it was just a formality. And mind you, even up to date, we've never had public participation is one of the 10 values in Article 10, but we don't have a public participation, a standalone public participation law in Kenya. So maybe I'm seeing our political class taking or giving that priority, having a public participation law. And also on the other side, I'm hoping Kenyans will keep the momentum. So in future, hopefully by 2027, we will see more and more young Kenyans registering as voters, because unfortunately in the last elections in 2022, there was a scenario whereby young people first voters did not come out and register as voters. And surprisingly, they are the Gen Z who came and protested for the finance bill. Hopefully, now that we can connect issues, we can join the dots. In 2027, they will come out and register as voters, and even encourage their younger brothers and sisters also to come out and register as voters. I was in a forum last Friday, whereby a young person stood and challenged the rest and said, if there is an impact that you want to speak about, even in 50 years to come, let us make a commitment that no member of parliament who voted yes for the finance bill will be voted in the next election. So if such commitments continue coming up, even the political class will start coming to the realization that the entire landscape, the environment has changed. So we need to listen to these people. So if the interest may continue being there, for the last 2 months, I've had young people calling us. They are trying to ask, how can we recall a member of parliament? What is the law? What does the law say? There is another interesting one who said they want to create a platform whereby they can track attendance of members of parliament in sessions. And this is information that is usually not availed to the public. So it's most of these demands continue being channeled to our government institutions. They may also try to open up and become transparent because of this of these demands. For instance, if today Parliament of Kenya decides to make public the attendance of members of parliament, that one will be phenomenal because most of them do not attend parliament. So people will be in a position to come and even check, oh, this is my member of parliament. Did he attend sittings? Where? So such questions. So I think that interest on issues of governance, that demand for openness and transparency, that ability to link, to join the dots, link your problems with us, link issues. I think it will be, it's a thing that will emerge in our political space and in the political environment going forward.
Thanks, Gitungo. Dr. Shikoh?
So for me, I think I want to disagree with somebody in the chat who was saying about disillusionment and like powerlessness because of the demos going away. I feel like every time I'm in a group or in a space, there is like this silent rebellion that is happening. Yeah. So what has happened is there has been a shift of mindset. And while right now, yes, some of the promises people have gone back on and stuff, what happened in June, those 4 weeks in June and the first week of July is people realize that they actually have the power. Where do you see, and I mean, if you're on TikTok, you hear, where do you see an MP running for dear life? Because actually the citizens are a threat. And while, yes, there is that going back, many people have those images etched in their brain that we made the MPs run. We made the MPs apologize. My MP Nakuru was running around saying, I am sorry. Yeah, with a t-shirt and his wife wearing slippers. Yeah. So we yeah, I mean, it was the most hilarious thing. And while some of it was gimmick, some of it was genuine fear. Yeah. And then people saw the power of people and positivity, even in light of all that was happening. They saw the camaraderie of Kenyans. So inside people's psyche, something changed. Something did indeed change. And they say this is, and what I'm loving about the young people is that they're saying Kenya ni home. Yeah. And that's the ownership of the Kenya and redeem. Somebody said, I'm so happy that we repossessed. They're not calling repossessed. They are saying we took back our flag, wearing the Kenyan flag. We used to wear the bracelets. We all love Kenya. Yeah. But it had a greater meaning when you say Kenya ni home. Yeah. And for those of us who've lived outside, you realize that many of your Kenyan friends actually want to come back home. Nigerians, they do not want anywhere near Nigeria. They've Japan completely gone. Yeah. Other countries, Zimbabweans, they do not want to see their country. Kenyans, all of them, like in my graduate school, many of the Kenyans actually did come back home. Yeah. People I've worked with in other countries, they have come back home because they've invested back home. They want to be here. Other people say, I'm going to buy my yacht, Ukoivo, somewhere, Sicily. I don't want anything to do with my country. Yeah. But Kenyans are investing back home. They want to come back home. And that what's that word that we use? That wanting to be a Kenyan is very, very important, and it was reaffirmed. And that psyche is what is going to make a difference. The fact that we love Kenya and we love home. And if I was a politician at this point, which I never want to be, by the way, is I would say, how do you capitalize? That is like a great social capital on the fact that Kenyans actually love home and want the best for this country because it's home for them. How do we capitalize Kenyan home and make sure that Kenyans actually bring back our, what's that word? Not royalty, patriotism, and grow on that patriotism. How do we capitalize on and that psyche? Even the people who felt like Kenya is hopeless, like many of us, I have many of my friends in the older millennials who are really disillusioned and were ready to leave, like because we have the options to leave. Many of them like, yeah, there might be something. Let me vumilia for another year or two. There might be something in this country that I am, that untapped energy, that change in mindset. I always say technology is great, but if you're not changing like a human behavior, you're not doing anything. And for me, that whole process was the change. Again, going back to the laggards, because you can hear the laggards now. They're like, huku ni Kenya ni yetu. We are going to protect us. Yeah. And how, I mean, I'm seeing questions on the chat is how do we sustain this civic tech? There's a couple of initiatives. I've seen GIZ has an initiative. There's Hacky Hacks that we are involved with. And we're trying to see how do you support these young people, because it's self-driven. It's these people are not being paid. And that is something that I loved about Kenya, because for at the longest time, everybody would ask, what is in it for you? Why are you doing this? You know, that question, very annoying question, especially when you want something bigger than yourself and somebody is asking you, so what are you going to get out of this? But when, in the last few weeks, months, we've seen Kenyans, smart Kenyans with great brains and great skills coming together and giving of their time and skills for free because they see something good out of it. And that camaraderie is what I'm loving about Kenya. And because people are not seeing in terms of business models and think that's why they're building this technology. The goal is how do we take it to the next level and make sure that they are sustainable? That is a question that is still out there. Yeah, is how do you sustain this innovation to make sure that it's having the kind of impact that it should be? So I know in Hacky Hacks we are brainstorming and talking about different ideas on how to do them. How do you support these young people to be able to make them continue doing what they're doing as their side hustle or their main hustle? Is a question that we're asking. It's still in the air, but it's something that is a question that is worth asking. And a couple, I know GIZ is asking the same question. I've seen I have now is asking us guys with the Hacky Hack movement. We are asking that question is how do you empower citizen participation? Because many people, and as a Christian, I speak as a Christian, yeah, and in my Christian cycle, many people felt like supporting this movement, supporting this conversation, supporting citizen participation is being anti-government, anti-authority, anti-anything. But I think it's the contrary. We want to support our president to be the best president in the universe. And how we're going to do is get him to be more accountable, get our leaders to stop being prideful. That is against biblical laws. Yeah, get transparency. Yeah, show everything. Even in the biblical times, everybody used to be counted. Pangeni laini kila mtu 1, 2, 3, 4. Nyinyi mtapatiwa hii Canaan. Canaan ni yenyu. Hiyo shamba imekatwa ni yenyu. Nyinyi children of or let me like one of the sons. Yeah, na nyinyi hii ndio yenyu. You know where you're going. That it was pure transparency, and that is the kind of countervision transparency you're asking. It's not about being anti, and I'm speaking to a very particular group of people who I know are still struggling with the idea of, am I being anti-government, anti-president, anti-this, by being outspoken about these things and saying that if you're not a responsible citizen, you're actually anti-Bible, anti-Christianity, because it is our highest thing to be. True religion is about taking care of the poor and the widow and serving justice. And that's what this movement has been for me. It's just about this, is a young person is able to get equal opportunity around everywhere in Kenya. Then that's true religion. If we can get our president to be able to see that, then it's true religion. The fact that the president is now holding town halls is a true reflection that we actually did move the needle by asking for greater responsiveness from government. And that is my response to that particular group of people who are struggling with this. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Because one of the things that we have we're seeing increasingly is the kind of sentiment that I think it was Nicholas pointed out, and then also Wandia kind of asked, which is that now that there's a lot of like let's say, pushback, and there's a kind of like counter revolutionary spirit that the government has put in place, and the things that people are campaigning against are now being entrenched by the powers that be by doing things like returning the people from who were dismissed from cabinet back into the cabinet, and then making it look like a lot of this was kind of in vain. I think it's really important for us to now ask ourselves, is it, oh no, what is it that we're actually trying to fight for? Because at the end of it, like the civic tech and all the tools and all the platforms that we've talked about, is they're just an extension of ourselves, a way for us to scale up the work that we're doing, to build communities, and to push and agitate for the change that we've been trying to accomplish. So I guess as I hand back to William and the team at CC Hub and iHub, I think the question we need to ask ourselves is not how these movements and these platforms and these apps can like in turn add value to the work that we're doing. It's how we can give value to them, because at the end of it, we are trying to push and agitate for our country and ourselves. And we're using these tools and these platforms as a way to scale these things up beyond talking about the generational divide and talking about the people involved. And I think one of the really kind of fantastic things that I have seen, especially in like the coverage that we've been doing at Africa Uncensored of the protests, is that at the end of it, the people who are on the streets are not unique. They're not special. It's literally people just like us. It's you and me. It's people who've seen the value in actually going out and agitating and pushing for change. So as we kind of take stock of what we've just talked about in this conversation, I want us to also ask ourselves, like, how are we going to like continue the work that we're doing? How are you going to support the work that other people are doing? Say the work at Hacky Hacks that Dr. Shikoh pointed out, and the work that Mzalendo is doing with, and what Gitungo has pointed out, doing public participation using Dokeza, for example, or attending these town hall meetings that they call for, or even just doing something as fundamental as going into these groups and these platforms that we occupy, and then having a conversation about the issues that affect us, and trying to translate these things into a language that everyone can understand so that everyone can truly participate. So like civic tech in and of itself is not a solution. It's just a means for us to try to agitate and to try to push and to try to build. So I'd say that we need to think about ourselves, what we want to accomplish, and the communities that we can build around us, and how we can use technology to accomplish that, because that's a really fantastic and insightful conversation that we can have amongst ourselves. And yeah, as we try to do that, there's all of these fantastic things that the folks at iHub are doing, and the folks at all of these different initiatives are doing as well. So let's try to plug into those and try to see what we can get and what we can give as well. Yeah. Over to you, William.
Great. Thanks so much, Eric, for this particular conversation. Thank you, Gitungo. Thank you, Dr. Shikoh. Thank you, Mark, for sharing those insights with us at the beginning of the conversation. This has been quite brilliant, like 90 minutes where we got to learn, what's actually been happening, and get a bit more context in terms of, how these technologies have actually, enabled for this push for change, right? One of the things that I took away at the beginning of the conversation in terms was how tech, or how this platform is actually being used as an amplifying force to just kind of, make the voices heard in terms of like what's actually the sentiment on the ground, right? There are a lot of like rumblings, but I think it's like this platform will enable, like this feeling, this sentiment to actually have like a global voice. But one thing I think that I really like what was Dr. Shikoh mentioned again. Sometimes it isn't the most like technical tools that again really pave the way, but again some of the fitness tools, right? Again, I think I was under the impression maybe like the finance bill GPT or the corruption control GPT, kind of like the one that ultimately had the ability to actually get people involved, but it was actually like the civic rights movement where basically just talking to the people on the ground at their level and at their language, giving them a chance to actually participate in this conversation. I think, had this ability to kind of democratize access to, this thing that we call, governance. So again, really, really, thankful for you guys sharing your time for this particular conversation. There's so much that we could have covered under this particular topic, civic tech. There's issue that we kind of glimpsed on around, like, that issue about data privacy in terms of the gray areas that that we need to be talked about, right? In terms of how the past we've only been getting access to our politicians on their terms, but this time the tables had turned, right? We were now calling them or messaging them at odd hours of the time, odd hours of the night, just demanding accountability, right? So how do we address issues like that? And in terms of just transparency and accountability, a lot of this work relies on data, right? Again, how do we get access to some of this data, right? Again, some of these projects that Murara Kabaso is actually, going to this lose like his fact-finding missions on, right? This is public information, but again, we need to have like more transparent, governments. But that relies on us having access to this meaningful data. So how do we kind of have this balance between what we have access to as citizens, as our rights, and again how do we actually utilize that to actually hold our leaders to account. So this was part of a series of conversations that we're going to be having. This is just like a first of the conversation. We are going to be having a mix of conversation, either in person or or virtually. There are a couple of technical hiccups with today's conversation, hence why one of the panelists was not able to join. However, they really want to be part of the next conversation. I know also Mark from Nendo would also like to be a part of the future conversations. So we are going to be sharing the schedule in terms of what are we looking to kind of cover and kind of talk about upcoming events. Would like to hear some of your own thoughts in terms of feelings in terms of like what do you want us to share about. So all the attendees, again, we're going to be sending a survey in terms of what do you want us to talk about? Do you have any people who you feel like would be knowledgeable in these particular areas who would like to contribute to this conversation in terms of how do we keep this movement going? But again, it's been a pleasure hosting this particular event, and again, can't wait to make this kind of a regular series. And again, thank you to the panelists, and also again the attendees who are able to stick it out for this 90 minutes. That's pretty much it on my side. Again, till next time, I'll be your host, William Sisoni, the community manager at iHab. Should you have any questions in terms of the work we do, again, we will share in terms of contacts, in terms of how to get to us in our team. But yeah, till next time, we'll be here to have this conversation and keep the fire burning. Till next time, bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you all.